Today, I wanted to talk about a little cool Reddit post I saw about non-duality, specifically about enlightenment. And I wanted to comment on it or explain the conversation I had about it because I think it was productive and it really illustrates some problems that people have on the non-duality path. Definitely a problem I had that I feel like I got past. So let's look at the post. So the post is titled Enlightenment. And it says, I think it's bullshit. The whole concept was something I've been interested in for quite some time, and I read and watched and listened about it. The whole concept seems to be falling apart under even a little scrutiny. There's no self, is what these people say, and the only reason we listen to them is because they seem to have shed unnecessary suffering because they no longer identify with the ego. But if there's not a body or a mind, but if they are not their body and mind, why do the bodies correspond with this knowledge or lack of knowledge in seekers? There's many other things, but I'm not here to attack anyone, so please have a grown-up discussion with me. And that was a really nice post because he talks about, a core issue we have, which is, these people say that there's no self, but if there's no self, then why do we appear to have a self? It's clearly a contradiction. And here's another great part of this is the only reason we listen to them is because they seem to have shed unnecessary suffering because they no longer identify with the ego. Okay, so I want to start with that. They seem to not be suffering. And so this comes down to me to choosing a meditation teacher or a spirituality teacher. How do you do it? How do you do it so you don't get screwed, right? So there's teachers out there who just want your money, and there's teachers out there who don't just want your money, but they don't know what they're talking about. I'm one of those teachers who doesn't know what I'm talking about. In fact, that's why I do health coaching and not non-duality teaching, is because I really consider myself more of a coach than a teacher. So, and by that I mean more of a friend or a partner in crime rather than someone who's going to tell you how it is. So, they seem to have shed unnecessary suffering. So, we'll go to my answer. So, my personal criteria for choosing a teacher goes something like this. 1, their methods do not rely on speculation and belief, and they're instead dependent on personal experience. 2, they embody spiritual principles in their life. You can't always tell because sometimes people's public and private life are totally different. 3, you feel at peace when you're in their presence. They seem like a nice person to be around. And this is just very simple. You want what they want or what they have. 4, they don't preach or try to obtain more followers. Now, there's nothing wrong with having some followers or, having a social media site or whatever. But, hopefully they're, it's just something to look out for, right? If someone seems like they're trying to get 10 million devotees and then, charge them all $500 a month for a course, maybe there's something to that. Like maybe that doesn't mean that that the teacher is not valid. It just could be potentially a sign that the teacher is not embodying honesty, dispassion, and things like that. So it's just something to look out for, right? It's not a total no-go. One thing I care about is that they lived a perfectly normal life either before or during the time that they were a spiritual teacher. The type of spirituality I'm going for is mundane. It's spirituality in normal life. It's being a householder. So um, although learning from like Buddhist monks or Vedanta monks or whatever is awesome. That's just not. I don't think that I that's my path, right? So this is just my thing. Um, and then in that vein, they don't feel a need to dress up a spiritual teaching in an ancient tradition, but instead they focus on a modern representation that pays respect to ancient traditions. And I think this is just a practical thing. Um, Ancient traditions tend to be, well, there's nothing wrong with them. They're often just not the best way to present something at this time because we live in a modern world with modern metaphors. So instead of the Hindu metaphor or Vedantic metaphor of, there's a stick, but it looks like a snake. Instead, our metaphors are things like screens and thanks Rupert, and holograms, right? So modern metaphors, modern representations, modern wording, etc. And a lot of the truly, truly good teachings out there are they seem modern, even though they were written thousands of years ago. So there's really nothing wrong with it being an older teaching, but it's more about how well does it hold up to modern thought, ways of thinking. Okay, so given those constraints, who are some of the teachers I like? I just want to point out, Michael Singer has been a huge influence on me. He wrote the Surrender Experiment and the Untethered Soul. He's a householder, yogi. He does his own kind of thing, but he honors plenty of teachers during his services, like Ramana Maharshi and Yogananda and people like that. So, his teaching is very practical, very modern, but comes from an ancient kind of path. Rupert Spira, obviously, if you're on YouTube talking about non-duality, you've seen Rupert. I really like his ultra modern presentation of these things. And yes, he has a business, but I can tell you that from my experience, his path speaks for itself. It seems to work. It doesn't require a lot of beliefs. And the other thing is I really do feel peaceful in his presence. I've been to his meetups a couple of times. And he lived a perfectly normal life before becoming a spiritual teacher. Ajay Shanti, he is another Bay Area teacher. I really like his stuff. He's just pretty straightforward. He runs a business too, but from what I've seen, he embodies spiritual principles very well, and his path makes plenty of sense. Doesn't require any extra beliefs. So, given that, I just want to say I'm wary of the so-called Neo-Advaita teachers, and the way I'm describing Neo-Advaita is any teacher that says awakening is liberation. That's a dangerous thing that you might want to look out for. And what I mean by that is, I think awakening or experiencing the truth of these principles is very, very doable for a lot of people in a short-ish time frame. And in a way, it can relieve a ton of suffering. But what we have to do is make sure that we don't say that because we've become awakened to this, that we're done, that everything is fine, and that there's nothing to change. That's a dangerous thought because the reality is that the universe needs us to continually work Um, it's not really work after awakening, but there is an evolution that needs to take place, and suffering can come and go. And so this awakening liberation talk, it's all just words, right? It's just it's my definitions. I would call awakening the recognition of your true nature, whereas liberation I would call the full, never-ending, never-lapsing extinction of the mental tendencies for to go towards pleasure or away from pain. That's what I would call liberation. So I'm not liberated, I'll tell you that, but I do feel like personally, in my experience, I've experienced awakening, and so that's where I'm working from. So that's kind of an overview of the teachers. Now, once again, the question was, let's read the question again. Just because these people appear to have shed suffering, we listen to them. And the answer I'll give you is yes. It's potentially dangerous. You can never truly know if your teacher is like full of shit or not. And that's why it's so important that we don't put our belief in the teacher and we focus on the teaching and how it relates to our personal experience. So in my opinion, a good teacher should start off any teaching by saying, don't follow me, do these experiments, see for yourself, period. Don't take anything, I have to say at face value, because it won't work for you anyway. Don't form a belief about this. Go try it out, see how it works. And that's, I believe, what the Buddha said. So that's a solid approach where you no longer have to worry so much about teachers. And in fact, some teachers who I originally thought were full of shit started making a lot more sense over the years. So you never really know where a teacher's at. It's not nice to call people out either. Okay, so the next thing he says is there's clearly a contradiction in the teaching, which is, they say there is no self, but clearly there is a self, there are emotions, there are all these things. And I'm not going to go deeply into, how that, the answer to that, as much as I'll say this. Especially Rupert Spira will tell you when you're studying his stuff, he calls it a thorn to remove the thorn. And what that means is when we're working on these exercises, these explorations of non-duality, we come from a perspective that is specifically set up to have some desired result. So if we're trying to experience no self, what we do is we come from a set of ideas or a point of view in which there is no self, right? So if that point of view in this case would be, I am looking at my hand and my hand is not me. I experience the experience of seeing a hand, right? So that is a point of view. Now there's a totally opposite point of view, which is I am the hand because I am the consciousness in which the hand appears. Those two statements contradict each other, but they have different purposes. The first statement, I am the witness of the hand, is meant to eliminate a feeling that you and the hand are the same thing. It's literally to experience no self. The second point of view, which is I am the consciousness in which there is a hand, is there to experience unity. It's there to experience the inseparability of everything. So the point is this, is that don't go to Rupert or any other non-dual teacher for an explanation of reality. Go to a physics textbook for that. Because they're going to give you a bunch of contradictory statements. And I love this verse from the Tao Te Ching. If it wasn't, I'm paraphrasing, if it wasn't the Tao, or if most people didn't laugh, it wouldn't be the Tao, right? Didn't laugh at it, at the presentation of it. In the same way, if the teaching didn't seem contradictory and dumb, it wouldn't be the teaching. It's just a funny little verse. So yeah, in this video we talked about choosing a teacher, how we want to look for peace. We want to see their personal lives, being conducted in a moral fashion to show that they have embodied these principles. And the other thing is we want their teaching to not require a bunch of external beliefs. So those are the main points on choosing a teacher. And the other point is that in doing these spiritual explorations, we really need to leave that tendency to want to figure out about the world. We have to leave that at the door and say, no, these are just experiments we're running to learn more about how reality is not. And those experiments are going to require different viewpoints, which inevitably are going to create contradictions. But we have to do the experiment to actually see firsthand what these different points of view are. This whole thing is not a constructive process of building up beliefs. This is a deconstructive process of shedding beliefs. Finding out that your belief that you're separate from the universe is in fact false. Not finding out that you are the universe. Right? So, I hope that was helpful. I know I was stuck here. My personal experience is, I had a lot of times where I thought, this is bullshit and these teachers are bullshit. And I don't know. I just ended up sticking around and here I am. So I hope that was helpful. Yeah. So once again, I'm Nick. My channel is surrenderhealing.com is my website.